Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on building inclusive teams by embracing cognitive diversity for enhanced effectiveness. It's lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and join. For those of you who haven't met me before, hi, I'm Jamie Beaker of Brett. I am a whole brain thinking facilitator and learning architect through my organization, Celebration. We support organizations to think about their thinking, and by thinking about their thinking, they get better results. So I really want to thank you all for joining. If you want to find out a little bit more about Celebration and the work that we're doing, you can come onto our website, which is www.celebration.uk. So we're going to be going through a methodology today called whole brain thinking. This is a proven methodology that has real application. And what I love about whole brain thinking in comparison to other psychometrics that are out there is it has a really easy to take away application model that you can literally use to any task, any challenge, and use it as a frame of reference to be able to take a holistic approach to any task that you're taking on. I will be here. This is live. So do feel free if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that you want to be able to add. I can see them. So I'll probably go through if they're important in the moment. I'll try to answer them in that moment in time. If not, you can still put them in the comments and I will try and come to them at the end as well. So let's get on to the bulk of today's sessions around building inclusive teams. I wanted to put this webinar on as a starting point to kind of get people involved with whole brain thinking and understanding its application to all of the different works that we do. But I think what I've noticed recently is there's a big conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, and particularly around the sense of belonging within that space as well. How can we make people feel that they belong within an organization? How do we make sure that they feel included within that organization and that they are acknowledged for culture add, not just culture fit? And we'll come on to that in a bit. We're going to go through a few resources that we can use and a few different ways that we can take these perspectives on whole brain thinking. But if you're looking for any other guides that we talk about within this session, they're all on our Instagram channel. You can just go to instagram.com/celebration.edu. So hopefully this has got you curious. This has got you in a place that you're ready to learn and find out a bit more. So let's jump into today's bulk and the topic that we're going to be going through. So building these inclusive teams, let's have a bit of an understanding around what that means for us. And let me go back to the beginning of the presentation, probably always a nice place to start. So, said about myself, and I've said about Celebration. A recent study has found that 35% of organizations noticed higher profitability when they observe that they have diverse teams. And when we're talking about diverse teams, we're thinking about it through lots of different lenses, one of them being cognitive diversity. So, what do we mean by cognitive diversity? Well, cognitive diversity kind of looks at the different ways that we perceive the world around us, the different ways of thinking, the different ways that we all process the information. And this allows us to kind of recognize that there's not just one way to perceive a problem. We all have different preferences of how we like to observe that data and how we like to digest that information. So let's have a look at, first of all, what are some of the challenges that impact inclusivity in teams? And I'm going to subtly add in little bits of whole brain thinking perspectives around that as we go. So the first one is the lack of data and insight. Sometimes we find it really hard to make diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging tangible. And this can sometimes be a bit of a blue frustration, and that makes sense to you in a bit. We can also find that there's really inefficient processes. I always take, for example, reasonable adjustment. Nobody wants to be reasonably adjusted within an organization. That's not the way that we like to perceive ourselves and our participation. These processes often are based on looking at people's ability and not just acknowledging people's preferences. And also, we can have different thinking styles and the ways that we like to process the information that's being given to us. Some people are quite happy dealing with the intangible, higher level. Other people want it to be able to be something that is very step by step, that they can make sense of, that they can digest easily. When we look at some of the challenges that are affecting inclusive teams, obviously, when we don't have a team that can be connected, that understands each other, that understands what everybody brings to the table, we get this poor team cohesion, which often adds to a lot of friction. And it's also friction that we don't necessarily know how to resolve. Now, not all friction is bad friction, and we'll come on to that. But it does make it sometimes difficult to be able to achieve the tasks that you want to be able to achieve. And this often leads to a resistance to change. So at the moment, we can imagine so many organizations are feeling change fatigue. There's so much going on that you've had, coming off the back of pandemics, there's restructures, there's organizational evolution. And it might feel for some people that they've just been going through one long change curve over and over and over again. And they haven't really ever settled on a point of feeling like there is a team that has a coherent vision for the future, a big picture plan, and instead they are constantly just firefighting. And that happens when we don't have that inclusion of the different perspectives and our strategies don't appeal to the different ways that people think and understand the organization they're a part of. So, some of the impact of this is that we miss some of the key insights that we want from our teams. We miss understanding what they're trying to tell us, the data that we need to be able to make informed decisions. It leads to a really slow progress that we find that this reduced in overall effectiveness means that we're never really getting to a point of performing. We're never really getting to a point that we feel like we're achieving what we need to be able to achieve. That also leads to a lot of unresolved conflicts, tensions within teams, as we've all heard many a times. People often leave bad managers, bad organizations, not because they think that it's a particular the organization's direction is wrong, but because they haven't been able to resolve the conflicts and tensions within the spaces they operate in. And so many organizations at the moment are finding it really hard to innovate. They're going across from a situation where they've been in an industrial workforce with an industrial mindset, and they're moving to a digital workforce with a digital mindset. And that's very different. And that takes a different approach to us being able to solve the challenges that we're facing within a digital economy. So, I said the whole brain probably out 7 times already. Let's get into what the whole brain model actually is. So, the whole brain model is a metaphorical model. It is a framework that can be used to analyze and understand the different ways that people think. People have a markedly different way in the way that they perceive information, that they like to assimilate information, that they like to make decisions, and the way that they like to solve problems. So, the reason it's a metaphorical model and the reason that's valuable to us is that we need ways of thinking about our brain that helps us to solve the challenges that it gives us in real life. And that's why we need to be able to have a structure or a lens to be able to look through that helps us to be able to value and understand not just the way that we perceive information, but the way that the people around us perceive information as well. One of the really important aspects of the whole brain model is being able to recognize that we are all of these quadrants to a certain extent, but we have differences in preferences. And I want to really strike the difference between preference and ability. A really good example I can give with this is David Beckham kicks a football with his right foot. I also kick a football with my right foot. We have the same preference, but a very different ability to kick a football with our right foot. This model is looking at the way that people prefer to receive information, not necessarily capability. And what's really important about that is, yes, a lot of the time when we do the things that we prefer more often, that's why we become good at these certain sections. But you can also have a preference that's different than your ability. So, for example, you might be someone who prefers working by themselves, but that doesn't mean that you're not a great team player. That doesn't mean that you can't participate as part of a team or, in fact, be one of the highest performers on that team. But you might have a different way to how you prefer to work. And that's okay. That we want to be able to make sure that as part of that inclusion, we're looking at all of the different things that people bring to the table and the different ways that people prefer to work, while also acknowledging how we like to work as well. So let's go into our whole brain model. You can see that we have our analytical quadrant. This is our blue quadrant. This is our people who are always looking at the bottom line. What's the facts? Give me the data. Give me the real core information that can be easily quantified and made sense of. We've got our practical quadrant, which is our green quadrant. I love a green. Green gets things done. Our greens are the people looking at how we're going to get from point A to point B and the steps that it needs to be able to take us there. So this might be structured plans, step-by-step guides, taking something that might be intangible and turning it into something that's very tangible. We have our red quadrant, which is our relational quadrant. This is more looking at the different ways that we connect with people in the world around us. So we're looking at, who's going to be on our team, who's the people who's going to be impacted by this, who needs to be informed about what's going on. And essentially our reds are looking at, our interconnectedness with ourselves, with the teams around us, and the people that we work with. We also have our yellow quadrant, and you've all been in a meeting with a yellow. You've been in that meeting where they've come in and gone, I had a great idea last night. It was this amazing idea. It's got this, and this, and they're very excited and energetic about it. And it's all about this kind of big picture, future vision, imagining possibilities perspective. Might not necessarily have all the detail there, but looking at that experimental and the different ways that they can do something or participate in a new way. So that's our whole brain model, and that's what we're going to use as our framework for building our inclusive teams. So to really make sense of this and make sure that we have this ingrained with our understanding of what whole brain is, essentially each quadrant is looking to the answer to a specific question, or a general question, I should say. So our blue quadrant is looking for the answer to what. Our green quadrant is looking to the answer for how. Our red quadrant is looking for the answer for who. And our yellow quadrant is looking to the answer for why. So if we were to summarize this in a single word, our blues are looking at the facts, our greens are looking at the form, our reds are looking at the feeling self, and our yellows are looking at the future. And essentially, all these different perspectives make up the way that we see and process the world around us. So, why is this a really useful model, and why do we want to be able to make sure that we understand that people think differently and that we have such a thing as cognitive inclusion? How do we make sure that everybody feels that what they bring to the table and what they understand and what they perceive in the world is valued within the organization? So, when we're hiring, sometimes we're either looking for culture fit or culture add. Culture fit is when we are looking for people whose values, beliefs, behaviors already align with the existing organization. They fall in place, they can be very easily understood by everyone, that they really kind of fit the framework of our organization. We also have culture add, and this is where we're focusing on the fact that somebody has something that they bring to the organization that might be unique or different or have enriched the organization's perspectives. And we've kind of in the last few years, particularly from a recruitment point of view, have been looking at how do we get the right culture fit people in. And I want to challenge that. And one of the ways that we do this is by taking that whole brain model and looking at a candidate and going, okay, this person might be like the people we've already got in this organization. But if we look closely at the way that they work and the way that they perceive information and the way that they're communicating with us, they're actually going to add something different. And that might enrich our organization. So we're really looking at the balance between our culture fit and our culture add. Do feel free to add comments, questions, anything that you have. They will come up as we go through, and I will do my best to answer them at the end as well. So, how do we apply the whole brain model to building these inclusive teams and to making sure that our organizations are inclusive of a range of different ways that people perceive and take on board information? I really like this quote, which is diversity is about counting people, but inclusion is about making sure that people count. And what we really want to be able to do is show that by understanding the different ways that people perceive information, we can make them feel like this is an organization that they want to be able to be at. This is an organization that values what they bring to the table, even if it's against someone else's thinking preferences. So I'm going to give you some personas to be able to work with. I've created a personification of our colors, and I bet if you're listening through, you're going, I know Ben Blue. I know someone who's got that strong blue preference, or we'll go through the others and you go, I can see these people. So Ben Blue, I often struggle to recognize and integrate diverse skills within teams, leading to missed opportunities and underutilized potentials. I need clear metrics and tools to assess and leverage these skills effectively, allowing data driven decisions to maximize our team's capability and improve performance. Remember, our blues are looking for that fact, they're looking for the bottom line information. So if you're managing a blue, what you might want to be able to do is go, these are the statistics. This is the information that you're working with. I'm going to send it in a bullet point, and you're going to have all of that information there. Or if you're working and your manager is a Ben Blue, it might be the case of being able to make sure that you always know what the return on investment is. You always know what your bottom line is, because that's going to be the way that our Ben Blues want to receive that information and the way that they understand the world around them. And therefore, we want to be able to make sure that we give them that kind of information. Next, we have our Gina Green. So our greens are always looking at more on that organizational step-by-step process. So Gina Green, organizing inclusive practices can be challenging without clear steps to follow. I need step-by-step guidelines and proven methods to implement inclusive strategies in our processes, ensuring everyone is on the same page and inclusion becomes part of our daily operations. If you work with the greens, sometimes what you can have is if you're trying to give them lots of intangible, high level pictures and overviews, that might become something that becomes a bit more concerning because they're going, it's hard for me to process that. It's hard for me to understand what I'm supposed to do within that. What I want is not the ambiguity, I want the clarity. I want to be able to know that these are the rules and this is how we're going to get from point A to point B. We have our Roger Red. Miscommunication can cause conflicts and misunderstanding, leading to frustrations and decreased morale. Uh, I seek effective communication tools and techniques to ensure that everybody feels heard and valued, fostering an open dialogue, mutual respect, and stronger interpersonal relationships. Our Reds are always looking to be able to connect with people on a personal level. They're always looking for the team and the considerations of the wider whole. Quite often, if you're talking to Reds, you'll see that a decision is never just about them as an individual. It's about how is this going to affect my team? How's this going to affect my family? How's this going to affect my friends? Because they see themselves as part of that wider whole. So when we're looking at our Reds from an inclusion perspective, sometimes we need to be able to make sure that they have something to be able to connect them to the group that they are working with and the wider organization. Then we have our Yara Yellow. So, resistance to new ideas that stifles innovation and growth, preventing the exploration of new opportunities. I need a culture that encourages experimentation and supports creative risk taking, creating a safe space for team members to share ideas, take bold steps, and drive innovation and success. And the reason this is really important to our yellows is because they're always looking at exploring new possibilities. They're always looking at the ways that they can innovate, and quite often, our organizations have been stifled because we like things to be very formulaic and they're very a step by step approach. And this means that our yellows often feel that they're not heard within their organization. There's not the opportunity to make a stamp or to be able to do something a bit different. What you've probably noticed as we've gone through our personas is that the preferences of our reds tend to be the frustrations of our blues. The frustrations of our blues tend to be the preferences of our reds. The preferences of our greens tend to be the frustrations of our yellows, and the frustrations of our yellows tend to be the preferences of the greens. And this is why it's so important to understand cognitive diversity when building an inclusive team, is because you need to be able to help people reconcile the differences. That actually that conflict is not in itself a bad idea. That actually having people that don't bring different perspectives to the table can be really valuable to us, but what we need to do is be able to hear them and what they're saying and why they're saying it, because none of these perspectives are any better than any other one. There's not one place that we go, this is the right way to be able to do it. But what we can do is by understanding all of these different perspectives, we will end up at the best decision. So we're always looking at how we can make sure that there is something for everything. Say it's a communication. I want to make sure that communication has something for our blues, something for our greens, something for our reds, something for our yellows. And it's a really useful thing that we can apply to anything that we're doing. That in itself creates a more inclusive communication, a more inclusive approach, and it means that we're going to come to the best possible outcome. So, Before I start up going into how do we apply this to inclusion, I want to also give people a bit of an oversight on cognitive exclusion. What do I mean by cognitive exclusion? What tends to happen is when we find people that have different preferences to our own, we tend to say things that diminish their way of thinking. We tend to say, you know what their approach is not the most valuable approach to us. That's not the information that we need. So quite often, I'll give you a really good example is a part of the recruitment process, you might be hiring someone. And generally what happens in a lot of organizations is people tend to hire people that look, sound, and feel like themselves. And the reason that they do that is because we're all a little bit egotistical. We all go, I'm great, and this person sounds like me and reminds me of me, so they must be great as well. And that's not always the best approach. We could be losing on a lot of valuable perspectives to us because we're not considering the wider whole. So if we look at our cognitive exclusion, some of the words that we might be saying that goes, you know what, this person thinks differently than me and I don't like it, might be when we call someone cold, rigid, unimaginative, overly critical. That might be how we're trying to say that, you know what, this blue way of thinking, that doesn't align with me. That doesn't resonate with me, and therefore that person in the way that they're approaching it doesn't have as much value. If we're looking at our greens, it might be that they're nitpicky, that they're boring, that they're micromanagers, that they're overly cautious. That might be because, you know what, when we're listening to them, there's something there that doesn't quite resonate with us. And once again, we're trying to cognitively exclude that person from a conversation. With our reds, it might be that we're saying that they're overly emotional, that they're soft, that they're touchy-feely, that they're unprofessional. You know, they want to be able to share a bit more personally. They want to be able to become potentially friends with co-workers. That's the way that our reds like to be able to operate. And some people are going to go, you know what, that doesn't sit tightly with me. This is how I'm going to tell that I don't like this. This isn't the way that I prefer to think about the world. And with our yellows, it might be that they're scatterbrained, impulsive, unreliable, unrealistic. And this is another way that we can go, you know what, I don't like that way of thinking. It doesn't resonate with me. How can I let them know that I don't like this way of thinking? Now, we obviously want to be able to do the opposite of that. We don't want to cognitively exclude. We want to value the different perspectives that everybody brings to the table. That's going to make the most efficient team when people feel that they can be safe to be their authentic self. And that's what's going to create our belonging within our team. So, how can we do that? How can we make sure we have something for everyone when we're working within our organization? So, inclusive teams, if we want to be able to appeal to our blue, we want to make sure that they've got diverse data sources, that we regularly share metrics with them, that we encourage data driven insights, and that we have fact based discussions. If we're looking at being able to make sure our greens feel included, detailed implementation plans, set some clear objectives, monitor the progress closely, and provide consistent feedback. If we're looking at being able to appeal to our reds, we want to foster that open communication. We might want to have team building activities that help them to be able to relate to the people around them. We want to be able to approach them with empathy, understanding, and also to be able to celebrate that team success to make sure that everybody feels valued and recognized within that team environment. Then if we're looking at our inclusion for our yellows, it might be around doing brainstorming sessions, some opportunities where they can do that experimental thinking, where they can consider the big picture. We can support risk taking, and we have to make sure that that's calculated risk taking, but we can help them to be able to go and explore things that are a bit different, bit new, follow that curiosity in a bit more of a way that is safe within the organization. That we want to be able to integrate diverse ideas and perspectives, try something that they might not have tried before. Quite often we go to people and go, why haven't we got any fresh ideas around here? And then when somebody puts a new idea on the table, their head goes on the guillotine. That's not the way we do it. We've always done things this way. That's not going to work for our yellows. We need to find a way of reconciling that. But another thing for our yellows and what's going to get their buy-in is a plan for the future, a strategy that's inclusive, that's understood, that shows the direction of the organization as well. So, what do we need to tell them and what do we need to show them? And I love being able to do this as part of this activity is we need to know that everybody feels that what they're bringing to the table is valued. So, how can we make this really tangible? If we're talking for our blues, show those statistics, provide the data, provide the research, and highlight those metrics. Make sure that there's some fact-based evidence in there. And often I say do it in a short, sharp, simple way, because that's the way that our blues are going to want to be able to process that information. If we're trying to appeal to our greens, what do we need to show them? What do we need to tell them? With our greens, we want to outline the step-by-step that's needed to be able to reach the goal that we're trying to achieve. We want to demonstrate the structure that's been put in place, be that hierarchical, be that communication channels, but however they need to do what they need to be able to do. So how do we want them to go about completing this task? If we've got templates, if we can show examples, these are going to be things that really help our greens to be able to understand what we're asking from them, and how we're going to get there. If we're wanting to be able to appeal to our reds, make sure that we tell them, show them that we're going to emphasize that empathy, that we're going to facilitate those open discussions, that there's going to be an opportunity to share experiences. It might be worth also offering workshops in order to be able to make sure that there's that team building connectivity. And for our yellows, we want to have an inspiring vision, that we're going to encourage that creativity, that we're going to share what that big picture strategy is. We don't expect them to go along mindlessly with approaches. We want to be able to get them to understand how we're going to get to that place that we want them to be able to get to. And we're going to explore these ideas and possibilities, even if we know that they might not all come to fruition. But that brainstorming is really important for our yellows. And when I say tell them, show them, appealing to each of these quadrants, is this is a holistic way to take an approach to any task. You shouldn't just need to go, oh, we're just going to work for this bit on our reds, and this is just going to appeal to our greens. Anytime that you're approaching a problem around inclusion, you should be looking for the opportunities to appeal to each one of these quadrants. All it could all be within the same workshop, it could be within the same meeting, but make sure you've carved out time for everyone. And the reason that this is important is because cognitive inclusion helps to foster the different ways and experiences that people work within the world of work, and the way that they choose to participate in the world of work. And that helps create psychological safety. If we can feel that we're allowed to authentically bring our preferences to the table, bring our ways of thinking to the table, and they are recognized and valued, that's going to make us feel psychologically safe within the organization that we're working in, which means that we're much more likely to take those calculated risks, to minimize the conflict that we have, in order to be able to get towards the goals that we're looking to achieve. So that's the end of today's webinar. If this has been interesting to you, if you found that useful, if there's things that you want to go into a bit more detail with here, I've got a few follow-up resources and services that you can check out. The first one is our scorecard. You can measure your organization's approach to cognitive diversity and inclusion. If you go to cerebration.scorecard.app, you'll have a very short 16 question profile to be able to go through, and it will give you a score of what your current approach to inclusion is, and some things you might want to consider to be able to help your organization be more cognitively inclusive. I've already said we have a whole brain thinking library as well at instagram.com/cerebrationedu. Loads of different resource guides there to be able to help you to understand all of the different aspects to whole brain thinking, and applying it to lots of different considerations that we have in the workplace. If you'd like to be able to get a personalized whole brain thinking application for you and your organization, drop me a message on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Jamie Beekoff Brett. If you drop me a line on there, I will send you across a personalized whole brain thinking application analysis. And if you're really interested in this and you've enjoyed today's webinar and you want to be able to get your hand on the resources, I run a community called Distributed Republic. If you go onto that, join and go to Celebration Decks, you'll be able to download today's deck as well. So if you're also looking to be able to bring this into your organization, we have an assessment called the HBDI. And essentially, HBDI takes the whole brain model and it applies it to you as a person. So it looks at your thinking preferences, the way that you like to perceive information. And we do this a lot often as part of team workshops and team facilitation, to get your team to understand how each other thinks, to recognize the value in the different ways that people think, and be able to make sure that you have an organization that's more inclusive in their approach to cognitive diversity. So if you're looking to go through this further, and you're interested in the workshops, the whole point of what we do is we take on board these assessments to help people understand their own thinking preferences. We get them to learn about the model. We go through individual and team thinking preferences. We then teach them how to apply whole brain thinking to every challenge that they're doing. I always talk to organizations about not just bringing entertainment, but value to a workshop. Entertainment is if you do these kind of assessments and you never talk about them again, you've probably had an entertaining day. If you go into the next workshop or you go into a meeting later on down the line and you go, you know what, we've had a lot of blue thinking in this meeting. Have we had enough green? Have we done enough on the red side of things? Then that's value. And that's what we're always looking at developing. And then obviously, we're always looking for the different ways to help you develop and implement these principles, both personally and as part of your organization. So, thank you so much for your time, energy, participation. Really appreciative to have you here with us today. If this has resonated with you, if you're looking for more information, then do send me a message at jamie@cerebration.uk. And also let us know if you have any topics you'd like us to explore or webinars you'd like us to check out and deliver in the future, then we'd be more than happy to. We'll have a look at how we can apply whole brain thinking in a range of different ways. Thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.